Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson where I'm going to talk about hobbies and pastimes. I should tell you that I did do a lesson on hobbies, I think 2 years ago almost, but I only talked about 17 or 18 different hobbies. In this English lesson today, I'll talk about, I think about 40 hobbies, something like that. If you're wondering what hobbies and pastimes are, they are things that you do for fun when you're not working and when you're not at school. So they're the things that you do in life that you enjoy, and you'll get an understanding in a bit about what they are. We use the word pastime sometimes. It means the same thing as hobby, but it's kind of an older word. I'm talking about things that people do for fun. So one of the things that people do for fun is maybe they like photography. Photography is when you go outside and take pictures of nature. Maybe you take pictures of people. Maybe you take pictures of buildings or the city. But if you like photography and you do it as a hobby, we call you an amateur photographer. That's different than a professional photographer. A professional photographer takes pictures for money. It's their job to take pictures. But if your hobby is photography, we would say that you're an amateur photographer. So an amateur photographer spends a little bit of money, buys really good cameras. They buy what they can afford, and they spend a lot of time taking pictures. And then now they might spend time editing pictures on their computer as well. So part of being an amateur photographer, part of having photography as a hobby, is not just taking the pictures, but also editing the pictures on your computer. So the first hobby that I talk about, that I just talked about, is photography. Some of you might be actors. So you can work as an actor, but some people also perform in plays every once in a while because they enjoy acting. So in my area of Ontario, there are some local acting groups. So you can join a group, and every year that group meets and they put on a play. Again, they are amateur actors. They have a job during the day. Maybe they work at the grocery store. Maybe they're a car mechanic. But at night or on the weekends, they go and they practice a play with other people. And then perhaps they put on a performance later in the year. So maybe you are an actor. Maybe you work during the day at a hotel, but at night you're part of an acting group. So acting can be a hobby. You might memorize your lines. So actors memorize their lines, and then they will go to a practice, and then eventually they will put on a performance or a show. Crafting. So I think this is bricolage en français. Some of my French viewers can let me know. But crafting is any time you make things out of paper, out of small items. You might make something out of cardboard and then paint it. You might create things out of like used bottles. Anytime you make things out of different materials, we would say that you are crafting. So maybe you have a photograph and you want to make a frame for it. So maybe you craft something out of old wood or some plastic or some paper. So crafting is just simply making things. Kids do a lot of crafting. My kids do a lot of crafting. So when you craft, you have scissors and paper and cardboard and construction paper. Construction paper is a hard kind of paper, and it comes in different colors. You have glue, you have paper clips, you might have a little bit of paint. I might have mentioned that already. But crafting is another hobby that some people have, and it's not just for children, okay? Some adults will actually do some crafting as well. So knitting and sewing, these two areas, there's actually, I could do a whole lesson on things that you can make out of yarn or thread or fabric, okay? So knitting is when you have two needles and you knit yarn together to make a sweater or a winter hat or mittens. Sewing is any time you sew fabric together, maybe with a sewing machine. What you see in the picture here is someone using a sewing machine. But besides knitting and sewing, there's crocheting, there's needlepoint. There are all kinds of hobbies involving fabric, clothing, thread, and some people really, really enjoy it. Some people make small stuffed animals for children. Some people make curtains or pillows or sweaters, but not everyone buys all of their clothes or all of their fabric items in a store. Some people enjoy sewing or knitting. I don't do either of these, although when I was a child, I did a little bit of needlepoint, or what we also call cross-stitching. It was a lot of fun. My mom taught me how to make a little cat on a piece of fabric. I really enjoyed it. I also poked my finger with the needle by accident, and it bled a little bit. That was not an enjoyable experience. Woodworking. So woodworking is a hobby that sometimes older people do when they're retired. I know a couple older gentlemen who are retired and they really enjoy woodworking. So woodworking is when people buy wood, they cut the wood, and they either build furniture or other small items. The men I know build wooden children's toys. So they have a little shop in their garage. They have a little woodworking shop. That's the area or the building where you do woodworking. And they have all different tools. They have a saw. This man is sanding the wood so it's nice and smooth. But they just have a really nice area where they can do woodworking. So they go and they buy some wood. They get a plan for for a children's toy or a birdhouse, and then they spend some time every few days doing some woodworking. I think woodworking might be a hobby that I will take up when I retire. When you talk about hobbies, you often mention that people take up a hobby. So you'll say things like this: did you hear Joe took up woodworking? Yeah, he's doing woodworking now. Or did you hear that Jane has taken up photography? She's bought a really nice camera and she's doing some photography just for fun. So woodworking is sorry, we don't say another, it's another, another hobby or pastime. I do think I might do this. I live on the farm. I might make a nice little woodworking shop someday. When I was younger, I learned woodworking in high school. There was actually a class, and I really enjoyed it. So I think that might be a peaceful hobby for me to do someday. Painting. So this is not something I enjoy, but some people love painting. So they love, I'll do paint by numbers. I don't know if you know what that is, but paint by numbers is when you buy a little painting kit, and then there's the painting is ready to go. It's just not painted. And then there's all different areas, and they'll have a small number in it. So the number 1, and then you look, and then you put that color in that spot. That's the kind of painting I would do. But if you paint as a hobby, it probably means that you like going outside to different places, and you set up your easel and your canvas, and you have your paint brushes and your paint, and then you paint a landscape. Or maybe you have a studio and you have someone come over and sit for you, and then you paint a portrait of them. So I'm using a lot of words in there and phrases related to painting as a hobby. Very interesting hobby, though. I know a few former students of mine who do painting as a hobby, and they're really good at it. I think if they could sell their paintings, they could be professionals, but that just takes a little bit of time. So coloring. So coloring used to be for children, but adults more and more are doing this as a hobby. This picture is, I think, an adult doing coloring. Notice also that I added a U to the word coloring because I'm Canadian. If you were learning American English, there's no letter U in the word color or coloring. But coloring has become quite popular for adults as well as children. As a child, I did a lot of coloring. I really liked coloring. It was a lot of fun. But as an adult, I haven't done a lot of it. But I do know I have a friend who likes to do coloring. She likes to buy coloring books, adult coloring books, which have very complex things that you need to color. Adult coloring books are not very easy. So your hobby might be astronomy. So if you want to have astronomy as your hobby, you'll need to buy a telescope, because astronomy is a hobby where you go out at night when it's very, very dark with your telescope and you look at the night sky. So we often refer to the stars and the moon and the Milky Way as the night sky. So astronomers, so people who do astronomy, astronomers go out in the middle of the night when it's very, very dark, and they look at the night sky, they look at stars, they look at planets, they look at the moon, and they just enjoy being outside. There's two reasons why I am not an astronomer, or why astronomy is not my hobby. One, I don't like getting up in the middle of the night, or I don't like being up late. And if you want to look at the stars or the moon, you have to stay up late. And the second reason is because there's lots of mosquitoes in Canada. And when you go out at night, they bite you. So I know that sounds kind of silly, but those are the reasons why I am not an astronomer. But I do have some interest in the night sky. You might enjoy writing. Perhaps you like writing little stories. Perhaps you like writing poems. But writing is certainly a hobby that some people have. You might also enjoy journaling or keeping a diary. So journaling or keeping a diary is when at the end of every day, you write down your thoughts about the day and you write down what you did. My mother-in-law loves journaling. So she, at the end of every day, she sits down and she writes down what happened that day. It's very, very cool. I look forward to reading parts of that someday. I'm curious to read about the days when I started dating Jen. I wonder what she wrote in her diary. Some people enjoy winemaking or beer making. So in Canada, you are allowed to make wine at home. You are allowed to make beer at home. And some people do this as a hobby. So they'll go and they'll buy grapes. They'll go and buy everything they need to make wine, and they will make wine at home. You can also make beer at home in small quantities. You're not allowed to make wine or make beer and sell it, but you are allowed to make wine or beer at home and just enjoy it as a hobby. I had a friend who used to do this, but the wine, it wasn't very good wine. It tasted pretty bad. It's kind of awkward when your friend makes wine and you go and you taste it, and then they say, "So, do you like it?" And it's like, "No, it doesn't taste very good." Some people enjoy wine tasting as a hobby. This is a hobby for wealthier people, for rich people. Where I live in Ontario, there are many vineyards close to me. There are a lot of wineries. A vineyard is where they grow grapes, and a winery is where they make wine. And a lot of wealthy people from Toronto, from the city of Toronto, come to my area because they would like to do some wine tasting. So they visit different wineries and they taste the wine. So your hobby might be wine tasting. Puzzles. So I mentioned the last time I did this lesson that my mom really enjoys puzzles. We also usually have a puzzle on the go in our house during the winter. We have a table in our back room where usually there's a puzzle in the winter months slowly getting finished. But a puzzle is when you have a box and it's a beautiful picture on the front and it's filled with all the puzzle pieces, and then you try to put all the puzzle pieces together. We don't actually have a puzzle out right now, but normally we do in January and February have a puzzle. And you can buy puzzles that have different amounts of pieces. The more pieces the puzzle has, the harder it is. Where am I here? Juggling. I put this one in. I don't know anyone who does juggling as a hobby, but there are some people who really enjoy juggling or other activities like juggling. I know you might like, there's something called a yo-yo that goes up and down. I know we have something with two sticks and a string, and there's a part that spins. I think it's called a Diablo. We got it as a gift from my friend from China when he came to visit. But you might just have something, maybe you juggle with bowling pins. Maybe you just juggle with small balls, but juggling might be a hobby. It's not my hobby. I can juggle a little bit. I can juggle 3 things, but it's very, very difficult. Cooking. So definitely cooking might be your hobby. Maybe you enjoy cooking meals. But you could also enjoy baking. So again, when you cook, you're preparing a meal. When you bake, you're usually making something like bread or sweet baked goods, okay? So we have something in English called baked goods, and that involves cookies or muffins, all of the sweet things that you can bake. So again, cooking might be your hobby. You might enjoy going to the grocery store and buying all the ingredients, and you might have a recipe that tells you how to prepare a certain meal. So again, ingredients are what you put in when you're making something or when you're cooking something. The recipe, that is the instructions that tell you how to make the dish or how to make the item that you are cooking. So maybe you enjoy cooking as a hobby. I mentioned that my kids enjoy video games, and I also enjoy video games. This is a hobby that I think has increased in popularity every year. In fact, there are some people who play video games professionally. You can actually get paid to play video games. But the vast majority of the people in the world who play video games do it as a hobby. It's something they do to enjoy spending some time playing a game, maybe doing a quest in the game. Maybe they like racing. Maybe they like fighting games. Maybe they like games where they can pretend they're a soldier, but video games have definitely become very popular. You might play a video game on a console connected to your TV using a controller, or you might play a video game on your computer using your keyboard and your mouse. Either way, there are many people in the world that like playing video games. A lot of fun. There are board games. So I kind of mentioned board games earlier. I mentioned the game of chess, but board games are games you play at a table with other people. Some people even have a special table for playing board games. We have a table that we set up, that a small table that fits 4 people nicely when we play board games. Hey, I do want to stop and thank Vasilisa for the super chat. Thank you so much. That is awesome of you. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate the support. But there are many kinds of board games. In English, we have games like Monopoly, checkers, and chess would be considered board games. In addition to board games, people might play card games. So you might have a deck of cards. You might shuffle the cards and deal the cards to other people and play a game like Rummy or Bridge. Or if you're playing with little kids, you might play a game called Go Fish. So board games and card games are definitely another thing that people do as a hobby. This, again, is a hobby that I don't do. This person is sculpting. A sculptor is someone who sculpts, okay? That's when you take clay or other things and you create something out of it. In Canada, we have people who do ice sculpting, and they might do ice sculpting in the middle of the winter. They might get paid to do it, but some people do it just for fun. But you can sculpt things out of wood. You can sculpt things out of ice. You can sculpt things out of clay. But it's simply the act of creating something 3-dimensional. So it's different than painting, which is flat and 2-dimensional. When you sculpt, you make something that's 3-dimensional. So I don't think I would be good at it. I don't think I have the patience, and I don't think I have the eye for it. In English, when you have an eye for something, it means you're good at designing it. Okay, so I don't have an eye for drawing or painting or sculpting. Not very good. Let's see here. Wood carving. So this is actually somewhat popular in Canada. A lot of people will carve things out of wood. In particular, they'll carve things like ducks. You can see a wooden duck here. In the far picture, you can see that person carved a wooden spoon. But wood carving is definitely a hobby that some people do, especially in the winter months. But also in Canada, many people will go up north in the summer and they'll go to a small cottage on a lake. And one of the things they might do when they're there is they might do a little bit of wood carving. They might go canoeing on the lake. It's definitely a hobby that some people enjoy. Probably not super popular, but it definitely is a hobby. Pottery. So when you are doing pottery, you have a pottery wheel. So that's a flat thing that spins, and you control the speed with your foot. And you would put clay on the pottery wheel, and then you would form it with your hands. The person who does pottery is called a potter. So if you said, "Oh, I've taken up pottery in my spare time," someone might say, "Oh, so you're a potter." So pottery is another hobby. I have a couple friends actually that do pottery. Notice how I talk about hobbies, right? Like you take up pottery, they do pottery. That's the English. Those are the English phrases you would use to talk about pottery. So I say this word wrong sometimes, but there are 3 things or more that people do as a hobby that you can find in the newspaper or that you can buy little books that contain them. One is sudokus. Sudokus, I think I'm saying that right. A sudoku is basically a math/number puzzle. Where you have to figure out which number is missing from all of the blanks. Hey, I do want to say thanks to Kenneth for the super chat. He says, "Good morning, Bob. I'm from Dominican Republic. I don't speak English yet, but I try with your help. Can you recommend any series on Netflix to help me learn?" So I can't right now. I haven't looked at Netflix for a while, Kenneth, but certainly fine. I know Netflix added the ability to slow the videos down recently, so you can play them back at a slower speed every once in a while if you have trouble understanding part of it. But definitely, Kenneth, Friends used to be on Netflix, although Friends is getting a little bit old, so some of the vocabulary isn't current anymore. But if it's still on there, I would watch that. Crossword puzzle is a puzzle where they give you little hints and you have to figure out what word goes horizontally or vertically. Did you get that? Horizontally is this way and vertically is this way. You can remember horizontal goes this way because horizon, when you look really far, you see the horizon is almost the same word as horizontal. And then a word search is where there's a list of words and then you need to find those words in the big box that has all the letters in it. So another very common thing, some people will do a crossword puzzle every Saturday. They might get a newspaper and it might have a Saturday crossword puzzle in it, or a word search. When I was a kid, the newspaper had a word search and my brothers and sisters and I would fight over who got to do the word search. So we definitely fought a lot about who got to do the word search. My mom had to make a list and say whose turn it was to do the word search every week. Of course, we have reading. I think I mentioned this earlier a few times. I might have even had a slide on this. No, I didn't. So reading is a very, very popular hobby, a very popular thing to do to relax. We always say reading for pleasure. So you read just to enjoy the story. Calligraphy. So this is not something I'm super familiar with, but I do know someone who does calligraphy. We live in a world where everyone prints everything out from a computer, but people have started to really learn again how to write with a pen and how to write script and beautiful artistic writing. And we call it calligraphy. It's very, very popular in some cultures. But in North America, there are people who have started to do calligraphy as a hobby, and they really enjoy it. Collecting. Okay, so collecting takes many, many forms. You can collect stamps. You can collect hockey cards or baseball cards or football cards. You can have a rock collection, but there are just many, many types of collecting that you can do. It is probably a very common hobby around the world. I know I had a friend who had, he collected pop bottle lids. Like he collected the lids from all different kinds of soda. I do have a friend who has a hockey card collection. And then I think if American English with this guy, Brent, was here, he probably knows people that have baseball card collections. Some people collect t-shirts. If people really like a sports team, they might collect what we would call sports paraphernalia. That's a big word, but they might have a hat, a t-shirt, all from that sports team. So collecting is a very, very popular hobby. I think probably around the world. I'm thinking of starting a stamp collection because I have a lot of stamps from people who have sent me postcards. So we'll see. Maybe someday I'll start to put those all into a stamp collection book. We'll see. Samra in the chat says that they used to collect different objects before. I had a rock collection when I was a kid. I had a special place where I had all different rocks in my room. Magic. So maybe one of your hobbies is magic. So if you like magic, maybe you've learned a few tricks. Maybe you can do some simple magic tricks. So maybe you know a few card tricks where you can pretend that you actually know real magic. But magic is something that you learn to do different tricks and illusions so that people think, so people can't figure out how you did it. So a couple of my kids tried to do some magic tricks at one point. And I think if they worked at it, they could get really good at it. But magic might be another thing that you do as a hobby. Welding. So this is an interesting one because welding can be a job. If you weld things, you are a welder. A welder makes it so two pieces of metal or steel get fused together or welded together. This man is welding. He is a welder. But some people do welding as a hobby. I have a friend who makes things out of metal. He makes art out of metal, and he does a lot of welding. So this is kind of a funny one as a hobby, but some people do enjoy making things out of wood. And if you enjoy making things out of metal, you might do a little bit of welding when you do that. So again, welding is when you use really high voltage electricity to make it so two pieces of metal become welded together. Drawing. So drawing or sketching are all different ways to, on a piece of paper, create something. So maybe you like sitting outside at the park with a pad of paper and you like just doing some sketching or drawing. Maybe you see a nice tree and you just sit down and you draw or sketch the tree. By the way, I'm using the verb to draw and to sketch interchangeably. When you draw or sketch, it simply means you're using a pencil to kind of outline and shade something in real life on a piece of paper. Let me see here. I'm just going to check where I'm at. Yes, we are almost, there we go. Gardening. Maybe you really enjoy growing flowers. Maybe you enjoy growing vegetables. Gardening is something that you do outside in the warmer months if you have a spot where you can do it. You obviously need to have a place where you can have a garden so that you can grow things. You might have a vegetable garden where you grow vegetables, or you might have what we call flower beds. Flower beds are small gardens where you grow flowers. So you might have a garden where you grow vegetables, or you might have a flower bed where you might have a garden where you grow vegetables, or you might have a flower bed where you grow some flowers. You can also have a flower garden, but generally along the sides of people's houses, they have what we call flower beds. Shopping. So this is kind of a strange hobby, and it's not really a hobby, but I think some people like shopping as a hobby. They just like going and buying things, or they like going and looking at things and maybe not buying them. But shopping can also be a hobby. It requires money. This is one of the reasons why shopping is not one of my hobbies. I like going to the mall, but I don't like buying things. So I guess you could say going to the mall is my hobby, but buying things at the mall is not my hobby. Geocaching. So this is an interesting hobby. I've done it a couple times, and it's where you take your phone, and on your phone you have GPS, so you can see where you are in the world. And if you do geocaching, you can find places where people have hidden small things, and then you can go and find that thing. And usually there's a little piece of paper that you can write your name on. You know, Bob the Canadian was here February 5th, 2021. And sometimes people will leave other little things. I've done it twice. It's kind of interesting because you have to find the hidden object. Maybe it's in a tree or under a bridge. But geocaching certainly is A cool hobby. You should try it someday if you're bored. I might do a little more of it in the spring when I'm hiking with my kids. Metal detecting. So you can see this gentleman is at the beach and he has a metal detector and he is looking for metal objects under the sand. He's probably looking for coins like money or rings. He's looking for things that people have lost, and he's using a metal detector to find it. My brother-in-law had a metal detector once, and it was kind of fun, but we never found anything cool. We just found old rusty nails. We didn't find anything cool, but metal detecting is something that you might do at a beach or somewhere where it's easy to dig because you are looking for things that people have found. Kite flying. So this is popular in a lot of places. You might have a kite and you might enjoy flying your kite outside. You need a windy day to fly your kite. Today would not be a good day to fly a kite here because the wind is 80 to 100 kilometers an hour today. That's a little bit, that's too much wind. But you might enjoy going outside. You might enjoy flying your kite. When I was a kid, I had a kite and my friend had a kite. We had the kind of kite with 2 strings so you could steer it. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that type of kite. In fact, I should get a kite like that again. That was a fun kite to have. If you have lots of money, you might, excuse me, you might enjoy horseback riding. I say that because horses are kind of expensive. They eat a lot of hay, they eat a lot of food. But if you like horses, you might have a horse, or you might simply go somewhere and pay money in order to go horseback riding. I have never been horseback riding. I think I have been on a horse once in my life. I think I would be afraid of falling off if I went on a horse. My grandfather had horses, though. My grandfather was a farmer in Holland, and he grew up before everyone had tractors. So he knew how to take care of horses, and he always had a horse on his farm, but I never got a chance to ride it. He was apparently really good at taking care of horses. But horseback riding is now a hobby that some people do. Model railroading. I see in the chat, Madi says that he used to ride horses. Very cool. Maybe I should try that someday. I should maybe try doing some horseback riding. It might be fun. Model railroading. So this is where you buy really small trains and really small tracks, and you build on a big piece of wood or on a table. You build a model railroad. Maybe you have little houses, or like in this picture, a little train station. But model railroading is something that some people do as a hobby. They buy different little train cars. So they buy the train, the engine, and they buy little train cars and little people, and they kind of create a miniature railway station or a miniature railroad. So model railroading. It's also called miniature railroading, I think. Rocketry. So this is something my brother did when I was a kid. He would build model rockets. So you can also call this model rocketry. So he would build small rockets and then he would launch the rocket up in the air. And one time he built a really nice rocket and we launched it and we watched it come down and then we couldn't find it back. It kind of fell along the river in the deep grass. So we'd lost his model rocket. But rocketry is something else that people might do as a hobby. They might really enjoy building small rockets and then going on a Saturday or on the weekend to launch their rocket. They probably count down like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then everyone yells blast off and the rocket goes up in the air. When it gets to the top, a parachute comes out and then it comes down again. So rocketry, super fun. Birdwatching. So birdwatching is something, I was going to say this is something older people do, but not necessarily. You can be any age. You need a pair of binoculars and you'll go out when you have spare time and you'll look for different birds. You might even keep a list of all the different types of birds that you have seen. But bird watching is something I have not done. But I think I could do this someday. I think I might actually enjoy bird watching because I do like hiking. And it would be fun when I'm hiking if I had a small pair of binoculars with me to just look for different birds and then kind of keep a list of what birds I have seen.